Hello, and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. It did out here about in Matthew 18, verse 10. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones, for I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. Fathers, do not embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. We need to learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, in the case of the widow. So let's get the copyright. We always play it. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is the use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips a balance in favor of fair use. And make sure to have trigger warning up here. How's everyone doing today? It's so good to see Chris, Lady O, and Eric. Thank y'all so much for coming in and supporting. Anybody comes in, please be sure to come in, whether you listen later or whatever, to put the thumbs up because it helps my community grow, helps get the word out. Appreciate y'all. Without further ado, first, I want to show people how to look for my book at Amazon. Almost hit the wrong thing. So you go to Amazon.com. Okay, let me move this out of the way here. See right here, it says all right here. And I got Darlene J. Clark Shattered Innocence Revised. See, it don't come up in the search at all when you just got it in all, okay? That's why I say you got to go like this and the drop down here, look up books. And then hit that. Voila, there it is right there. Shattered Innocence Revised. So you have to be sure when you do the search, make sure books is put right here. Otherwise, it's not going to come up. And it is in hardcover, softcover, and the Kindle version. And I will read what this says right here. In Shattered Innocence Revised, Darlene J. Clark courageously unveils the haunting realities of her tumultuous childhood, marked by abuse, betrayal, and unimaginable hardship. This raw, unflinching memoir not only recounts the painful moments of her past, but serves as a beacon of hope and resilience for those who have suffered in silence. Through her story, Darlene calls for understanding, awareness, and the courage to stand up against abuse, reminding us that survival is not only possible, it is triumph. For those seeking a tale of courage, of strength, and adversity, Shattered Innocence Revised will inspire and move you deeply. Go ahead and get off of that. So first of all, we've got to go ahead and go into what is childhood emotional neglect. Thank you so much for supporting me, Eric, and Lady you, Chris. And hi, Danielle. I forgot to mention your name. Hi, Danielle. You're over there at Eric's. So I know you're doing what you're doing, having to take care. And just want to say hi to you as well. What is childhood neglect, emotional neglect? Under the Keeping Children and Families Safe Act of 2003, emotional neglect in childhood is defined as a caregiver's failure to act, resulting in a higher chance of serious harm for the minor. Emotional neglect may involve any pattern of behavior or omission that doesn't allow a child's emotional needs to be met at a level where they can thrive. So if you basically leave a baby in a crib and you don't give it any kind of emotional support, you don't go and hold it, you don't go and play with it, you don't cuddle with it, you just basically you'll feed it, you change its diaper, put it back in a crib, and just let the baby stand and be in a crib. It's not getting its emotional needs met. A baby needs held and comfort, cuddled, coddled, sang to. There's a lot to taking care of a child and where it can help and grow emotionally. Don't be fussing and cussing at it when it's crying. Try to figure out what the problem is. When the baby's crying, a lot of times it's giving you a symbol like something needs done. I know that one little girl I watched, she cried and cried and cried, and her mama says, "Well, keep her in a baby bed. Keep her in when I babysat her." She said, "Just keep her in there because she just wants to cry all the time." Kind of find out uh, she was so wrong. When we got back from a trip from Birmingham Zoo, my kids, we had a call from um, the health department, and we had to all be tested to make sure we did not have the disease that she had. And thank God my family didn't get it. Her mama said, "What? You never let my daughter drink after you?" I said, "No, ma'am." I said, "I didn't want to drink after her, and she drank after me." I think she felt a little bit offensive because I didn't let her baby, but thank God I didn't do that because the fact is I would have had the chance of having that disease too. Because she's been healed, thank God it was caught. Children need someone to listen to them, to validate their feelings, and to have appropriate expectations for them based on their age. And they need the adults in their life to provide guidance on the challenges they face as they are developing. See, my point with that story is saying that baby was crying and stuff like that. And that baby had this, her mama had worked in a emergency room at a hospital. So she ended up contracting something and giving it to the daughter, and the daughter ended up with it. So the baby was crying because of that. The baby wasn't crying because it was spoiled, like the mother was saying, okay? Examples of emotional neglect may include lack of emotional support during difficult times or illness, withholding or not showing affection even when requested, exposure to domestic violence and other types of abuse, disregard for a child's mental well being, lack of intervention on the child's behalf, allowing behavioral problems to go undressed, social isolation, being emotionally unavailable or absent, ignoring a child, pushing a child past their mental and physical abilities. We all know that I have been emotionally um, neglected, regularly neglected. They would leave us abandoned, and we're going to go over abandonment in a few minutes too. They would leave us for weeks at a time with just my older two siblings that were about 7 and 8 years old. They couldn't turn on the stove to heat up the bottles. They couldn't do that much. But we were without adult supervision for a week at a time. And, my poor siblings, I don't know how they went about eating because Um, I thank God that my aunts did come in some of the time and clean up and change it. You have to get the clothes washed and change their diapers, made sure we were all cleaned up. But they did come in occasionally and do that. Oh, that's good. You said hello to everyone. That's nice. It's an emotional neglect, a form of abuse. Yes, emotional neglect can meet the definition of abuse in many circumstances. Emotional abuse can be any act or failure to act that causes immediate or long term emotional harm. While many forms of abuse are deliberate and malicious, emotional neglect can also occur subconsciously due to a caregiver's emotional intelligence limitations, history of personal trauma, health status, level of self awareness. Intentional versus unintentional emotional neglect. Childhood emotional neglect can vary in both cause and severity. For some caregivers, emotional neglect may be intentional, active denying or diminishing emotions to toughen up children, for example. Oh man, yeah, I heard that before when my kids were growing up. They said, you need to just toughen them up. I said, no, they need to be held during this certain time. Don't tell me when I can't hold my kid and I cannot hold my kid. And I think I was more self aware when I was doing my kids just because what I didn't receive as a kid, it kind of helped me to nurture them, be a better parent towards them. An intolerance for boys to cry because of gender norms is our society. And an example points out Beth Tyson, a psychotherapist specializing in childhood trauma from Media, Pennsylvania. Crying is a natural response to fear and sadness. When we don't allow boys to cry, they stifle their emotions, causing behavioral problems down the road. But when they're so little and they're a baby, don't say it's because of what a da 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 da. You know what I'm saying? There's something that needs done. It's also possible that a caregiver isn't aware they aren't meeting a child's emotional needs. This unintentional form of childhood emotional neglect can stem from past experiences and an emotional patterns passed down to the caregiver from their guardians. Adults with unresolved trauma from their childhood will often be triggered by a child's emotional needs, says Tyson, especially if the adult experienced emotional neglect or abuse as a child. When we witness our children demanding a need to be met that was not met for us as children, it activates the old memories that the behavior is unacceptable. Being uncomfortable with emotions may encourage neglectful behaviors like invalidating children's pain or emotional expression, using distractions to stifle or avoid emotional expression, allowing children to spend an abundance of time on electronics to stay quiet. Yeah, they get the electronics to be the babysitter, in other words. Avoiding eye contact with a child because you're on the phone. Well, I mean, y'all, please spend time with kids off the phone sometimes and play with them and show them how important they are. Please get down with them. I got down on the floor and played with my kids, okay? Tyson explains these common behaviors can lead to a lack of emotional connection with your child, may teach them to seek external sources of comfort, and can encourage them to internalize emotions. She gives another common example of unintentional emotional neglect in the form of telling children, it's okay, don't cry, there's nothing to cry about. Oh man, you remember when we were younger, how our parents would say, don't cry, I give you something to cry about. You know, when you're crying about something that really hurt. And they said, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about. This is a common reaction to a crying child and is a form of emotional neglect if it happens too frequently. There's nothing to cry about. How do we know there's nothing to cry about? We don't know why the child is crying. We need to sit them down like, what's wrong? If they're able to talk, right? We're able to sit down and talk about it. Like, what's wrong? Did something scare you? You know, find out what's going on. Signs of emotional neglect in children. Emotional neglect can be challenging to spot and often occurs alongside other forms of abuse. Signs of emotional neglect in children may include lack of confidence, social withdrawal, emotional volatility, difficulty controlling emotions, challenges in making and maintaining relationships, age inappropriate behavior, depression, anxiety. I know that I got still have a lack of confidence with everything I went through, but I try to build myself up the best I can. That's going to be forever a problem with me having enough confidence, but I'm trying to get there. But at least if I'm able to do a lot what I have done and am doing, I'm glad I've got people that generally care and stands up against abuse that helps get the word out. Yeah, isn't that ridiculous? They give you something to cry about instead of finding out the real reason why you're crying, Eladio. That was crazy. if you hear like a parent screaming and cursing and stuff like that, and sometimes you ain't even got to be sobbing hardly whenever they'll just see the tears running down your face. It's hurting you hearing the language they're saying. Like some of them, like with me, they said, "Well, you're a mistake. You're even a mistake to God." Of course, that's going to make me have tears in my eyes and cry when you're told that repeatedly. And so, when yeah, that's taking away who we are in true emotions. So let the child feel how they're feeling instead of later on, like when I was a teenager, my stepmom, of course, I was like a slave to him, doing the chores and stuff that even their other kids didn't have to do, just only me. I was a stepchild. So anyway, I was up there washing dishes, and when I had a smile on my face, she'd come up, kick my butt really hard, and say, "Take that shitty grin off your face." I'm sorry for saying the word, but that's what she says. Take that grin off your face. Okay, so I took the grin off my face. So of course, when I wasn't smiling, I looked like I had a chip on my shoulder. So a couple minutes later, she walked back up, and then she kicked my butt hard, and she goes, "Take that chip off your shoulder." And I'm like, "Okay, I can't smile, I can't frown. How am I supposed to act, right? How am I supposed to act? If I get in trouble for smiling, I get kicked. If I get in trouble for frowning, I get kicked. How am I supposed to behave?" And this is still as a teenager at age 15 and 16, okay? So, research suggests childhood emotional abuse may have the most negative impacts on mental health out of all children maltreatment types. Signs of emotionally neglectful behaviors in a caregiver may include persistent indifference toward a child, apathy, like you hate them, mindless behaviors, substance use, blaming the child for challenges at home or school, denying the existence of the child, viewing the child as bad or worthless, acting as if the child is a burden, using the child to satisfy personal emotional needs. Also, you remember how many times as a kid the parent didn't want to get up and get nothing for you or something like that, but they'll say, "Bring me a cup of coffee. Bring me this. Bring me that." I remember back when I was having to clean up the whole house. I remember I had to take everything off the TV to dust it, right? So when I didn't put it back in its proper place where it was before I dusted, like if it was a little to the left or a little to the right, I was giving a paper to draw the TV and to draw the knickknacks on top of the TV to figure out how it was arranged the first time, right? So she made me draw out the TV, draw out the knickknacks and all that. Then said, "Okay, now put her back that way." So I put her back that way. And she said, "That looks good now." She said, "But I like how you rearranged it. So now go back and rearrange it how you just had it a few minutes ago." And I'm like, "Do what?" This is all, crazy, right? It's a lot of neglect and abuse and control. And I told y'all the instances also where um, we all were sitting and watching TV. My siblings got up, went to the bathroom, which were her kids. They were my steps, and one was a half brother. But anyway, they could get up and go to use the bathroom if they had to, right? So if I had to use the bathroom when I was like I stood up to go to the bathroom, she said, "Where are you going?" I said, at the time my dad was dead, okay. I said, "I'm going to the bathroom." She said, "Sit back down. You didn't ask if you could be excused." I said, I sat back down. I said, "May I please be excused to go to the bathroom?" She said, "Yes, you can." So I got up to go to the bathroom. She told me to sit back down. She said, "You didn't ask me which foot I wanted you to start walking on to go to the bathroom." So I had to sit back down. Uh, May, which foot do you want me to walk on when I go to the bathroom? And she told me. And then I knew before I stood up, I had to re ask her again. may I be excused to go to the bathroom? Or she would have had told me to sit down and say all that all over again, right? So then I did, and I walked to the bathroom, but I had to use the foot she asked, told me to, and all that, or I was going to be beaten for that. Okay, so that is a lot of emotional scars there. You could not be yourself; you were a robot. Effects of emotional neglect in childhood. The effects of emotional neglect may vary depending on the specifics of the case. In 2016, a nationally representative study with adults found childhood emotional maltreatment was associated with increased chance of experiencing mental health disorders, including depression, anxiety disorders, substance use abuse, cluster A, B, and C personality disorders. Okay, I do have depression. I do have anxiety, PTSD. Well, I did try to null the pain with weed or with some pills sometimes, and I couldn't do it. It didn't work for me. Um, then I tried with alcohol, and I wanted to drink to forget. But guess what? I still remembered. But it was sad at 40 or something years old trying to dull the pain from the past. And then I could just remember, being tipsy, losing my balance. So I was more embarrassed with how I appeared to others being drunk, falling over some, because I wanted to present myself in the right way. So that's why you don't see me out drinking and stuff because it didn't work for me and it did not work to cover up the pain or anything because I still remembered, regardless of whether I was drinking or not. So drinking to forget did not work for me. And I thank God for that, or I might be an alcoholic today, right? So Myers Galloway explains that childhood emotional neglect can also show up in adulthood as inability to trust others, stress, internalization, self sufficiency, fear of abandonment, lack of boundaries, and other challenges in relationships, distorted sense of self. Tyson notes that adults who experienced emotional neglect in childhood may be more likely to repeat the patterns of neglect they were exposed to. But I did not do that as far as neglecting. But what the fear of abandonment? Oh man, since my mom had even left us in a grocery store when I was 4 years old, up from 2 to 4 years old, off and on. But the last time was I was 4 years old, according to my siblings, and there were five of us that was left. Luckily, my sister Gwen knew my aunt's phone number, and she called her. Then my aunt would come back. My mother would come back a week later to get us. But see, the abandonment issue is real. You would not believe how many guys. Um, there was one guy in particular. Well, two guys was starting a date, and both of them said, "If you're not without 15 minutes in the grocery store, then we're going to leave you behind." Needless to say, the first time I just said, "Just take me back home." The second time I just raced through the store and everything, but he didn't leave. But he stayed. He came in there, stood near the counter, and watched. And then he was seeing that the lady that I was behind, she said, "I want to pay with cash." "No, I want to pay with check." "No, I want to pay with cash." And then no one checked. She couldn't make up her mind. So he was seeing what was taking me so long. I took a personality test, and counselor told me I was so submissive that I was a doormat. I didn't even realize I did believe that some people are. Yeah, yeah, that's. I'm going to show that because people are going to think that I said that. Yeah, you took a personality counselor told you. Wow. Yeah, we basically had done that. Had a lot of our times, haven't we? We've been doormats. And that made us, when we're like that and we get treated like that, we also start thinking that we want to be a people pleaser. We don't want to make anybody upset. We're too afraid of smiling or whatever. I can remember when I first started telling my story, like to um, one of the guys at church that was a usher, an elder, and I said was telling him about it, and he said he didn't believe my story because I smiled. The thing about it is, my emotions, I didn't know I could really be myself, right? So the only emotions that I knew was acceptable was smiling. So it took me a while to be able to show my true emotions behind what I had to say, right? Because I was taught that I was not supposed to show emotions. So that's what kind of distorted because it said how to heal from childhood emotional neglect. Healing from the childhood emotional neglect is possible at any age. These tips may help. Cultivating self compassion. Myers Galloway suggests starting with self compassion, the art of being kinder to yourself. Okay, one thing I had to realize, I would say, you're so dumb because I was so used to hearing that, right? So I had to finally change that mindset. Like, do you want to hear somebody else call themselves dumb? No. Why are you doing it to yourself then? Other people don't really want you to be calling yourself, don't want to hear it either. Like, okay, okay, got to show that self compassion back to yourself. You are loved. You are cared about. You are genuine. You are respect. You are loved. You are worthy of love. Take some time to think about what your needs are now and know that you deserve to have those needs met. Even if your parents were unable to or willing or unwilling to meet those needs, she said. Yes, you are worth it. That's what they call. Anybody heard of healing the child within? Let's see what you had to say over here so I can see that. Hold on a minute, okay? I still have trouble with some people as I set my boundaries and fight. Yeah, I had to finally. There's some people like some of my family members who told me, like, I got a sister that's supposedly a preacher who told me that the things that happened to me was God's punishment to me being a bad girl. So, and I said, even the sex abuse at age 2? And she said, yeah, even the sex abuse at age 2. You were such a bad girl. You deserved that. That God gave you that punishment. And I had to finally just own her because that is a lie. That is a lie. Yeah, healing the child within. Y'all need to check out that for sure. Which means you're healing your inner child, healing the pain that had been done to you within, treating yourself with the same value and respect. One of the main things I had to do was I had to, for all that stuff that was happening to me, I was blaming myself as being a bad person, right? I had to finally start putting the blame in the right place and saying, okay, the blame is on the parent that neglected me, that didn't feed me. Blame is on the parents that beat me, that cut me, that sold me. The blame is on these perpetrators that cussed me out. The blame is on even the police officers who did nothing but blame me and threaten me and say that if you tell on your daddy again, we're going to arrest you. I mean, the blame's on them. And boy, it took the load off and it helps the healing process go easier. Yeah, you are right. God is love. Oh, lady, you're right. God is love. He did some plans, but he not like a human. He don't go like this, and he don't want because as I did that earlier, when I get over here and I read the Bible verses over here like I do. Okay, one of the things that I show, and I was a believer in God too, but whoso shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. So we got to remember that. But God's not that way about harming children. If unconditional love was absent from your childhood, having a pet may help cultivate it. Pets and time in nature can give you the unconditional love you lacked as a child and has the benefit of feeling safer than relationships with humans, suggests Tyson. The pets can be a stepping stone for trusting people. Getting a pet comes with a lot of responsibility, so it's important to decide once you know you can properly take care of an animal for the long term. By the way, tomorrow, y'all, I will go ahead and note that since it's on my mind. I was talking about pets. Um, a guy that I will be interviewing tomorrow for the Rescue Foundation. I'll be interviewing him tomorrow at 4 p.m. But he helps the people involved with the rescue is he has abused women, abused children, and abused animals. Okay. So this is going to be interesting. So I hope y'all come in tomorrow and support him. Tyson also recommends becoming an advocate for those who've experienced childhood neglect. She indicates taking action toward preventing the abuse can help provide you with a sense of relief and purpose in what you experienced. How oftentimes have you seen a kid walking down the street with dirty clothes or something? You know that he was hungry. And the kid walks up and say, I'm hungry. You got, whatever. If I was around, I would, first of all, I'd be a little bit nervous because I don't know if this kid, like one of my grandkids is allergic to dairy products, but I would try to do my best, and I would hate to tell the boy to wait around, because I don't want any offender being around either, so I don't know what I would do in that instance. I guess I'll see if I got anything in my car to eat as a snack or something, and I'll say, here, take this, right? And if we are actually inside a I'm pulling up in a McDonald's, and I'm going to get me something to eat or Burger King or something like that, and he's actually there himself, I'll go ahead and pay for something. We did that to an elderly man before who came up. You could tell he was a homeless guy. And I said, sir, let me buy you just something. I said, I'm sorry, I can't get much. And the next person said, well, you get that, and then I'll buy this. So then the other people that was standing back away from that homeless guy came up and helped further the help of this homeless guy. I thank them for that, stepping up. Advocating. Tyson also recommends, when we did that. So even writing a letter. And I'm thinking about, with one of my next books, I want to do like Dear Mother, I Survived and have all the different mothers that was in my life, right? And then I could end the chapter or start each chapter of whether I'm talking about my stepmom or whether I'm talking about my birth mom or these other people that presented themselves wanted me to call them mother, right? Um, and write a little personal letter to them as well. Even though they're no longer there, it still will go to say. So writing a letter to your past or your caregivers may help you express and process your experience. Try writing a letter to the people that neglected you, expressing your true feelings, and then burning it, said Tyson. Writing a letter to your younger self and acknowledging the neglect can be extremely powerful in the healing process. Tyson adds that journaling in general can also be a powerful tool, and working with prompts may make it easier. Requesting guidance and support if emotional neglect negatively impacts your day to day life and relationships. Speaking with a mental health professional may help. You may also find valuable resources and insight from online and local support groups where you can learn and share with others in similar situations. Let's recap. Any behavior, inattention, or disinterest that causes a child's emotional needs to be disregarded could be considered childhood emotional neglect. While many examples of emotional neglect depend on social and cultural norms, emotional neglect can also be unintentional due to a caregiver's past trauma and experiences. Emotional neglect can be a form of abuse, but healing is possible. Advocating for others, practicing self compassion, and speaking with a professional may help. Remembering things too, write down some important things like to go back to remind yourself, like put little post it notes like on your mirror. Say, you are valuable. Put another one, you are loved. Different things like that would help also. Emotional abuse and neglect, time to focus on prevention and mental health consequences. And y'all could understand, like in my book, I got it in there when my daddy shot at me with a shotgun, his version of hide and go seek, right? So, can you imagine the kind of emotional scars, emotional damage that does when you're 2 years old? And my sister said she had to push me to the floor. She said Daddy was trying to shoot, talking about me, trying to shoot me, and I was 2 years old, just standing in the middle of the room, facing the window. And then she said shards of glass and shards of splinter wood were flying everywhere. But my daddy was outside of the house and shooting in, trying to shoot at me. Okay, I thank God because he helped me survive. Because luckily, when I was standing there, none of the bullets or none of the glass or none of the shards killed me. Thank God for that. And I thank God for my sister that used her body as a um, to cover my body, and so she was getting hit with the glass and the shards of wood and all that. So I thank her for stepping up to the plate and saving me, but at her own risk. So sad. Summary: emotional abuse and emotional neglect are among the most prevalent of childhood maltreatment types and associated with a range of poor mental health outcomes. We need to move beyond correlational research and shift our focus so sophisticated multimodal studies to fully understand the psychobiological mechanisms and underlying these associations. So let's get on further down. So it looks like we don't want to get into all these big words and stuff too. So childhood maltreatment is commonly described as physical, sexual, or emotional abuse and physical or emotional neglect by a parent, caregiver, or other adult, with all kinds of abuse resulting from acts of commission and neglect from acts of omission. There's been relatively less societal and research attention on emotional abuse and emotional neglect compared with physical and sexual abuse and physical neglect. This might be explained, at least in part, by the less visible immediate impact, physical injury, or outward signs of abuse, and considerable regional and cultural variations of the definition of what constitutes emotional abuse or emotional neglect. I remember one of my friends told me one time that all she was getting was emotional abuse. And she said she just wished she would just go ahead. It hurts her so bad, the emotional abuse, that she wished she would just go ahead and hurt her physically. That it's already really hurting her in pain and being cut down and shot down like this. She said he would just wish that he'd just go ahead and just hurt her physically. Just hurt that bad. She said, I'd rather go ahead, be hurt that way. And I told her, no, you would not, right? But that's, and to me, I'm sorry for telling somebody that. No, you don't want to be physically abused, on top of it, to just go ahead and, because later on, the physical abuse causes the physical damage. When you get older, the scars and the remnants of that, there's going to be some things you're unable to do because that would take effect with the damage to the body. Certain facets of emotional abuse, such as constant swearing, yelling, criticism, or humiliation of a child, are easily noticeable. Okay, y'all, so y'all know that is abuse, okay? But others, such as unrealistic expectations or unreasonable demands on the child or unfair treatment because of certain characteristics or physical disabilities or the parents not always recognize. Such as, like I told y'all, when I was 15, I had to do the whole house. So I got off the school bus at about, I'd say about 4:15, 4:20, 4:30, right around that time. My stepmom would get home about 30 minutes later, okay? But I'm supposed to had, let's see, one, two, three, there's 5 bedrooms, all 5 beds. The sheets had to be washed, dried, and put up every day, according to her, and put on back on the beds. So I had to clean up every one of the bedrooms, had to dust every, like the living room and vacuum it and clean the kitchen really good. And her daughter was home all day, yet she didn't have to do no chores. But every day I got a beating because there was no way possible that I could clean that whole house, get the sheets washed, dried, and put back on the bed within the 30 minutes time. That was unreasonable demand on me, right? That was unreasonable. There's no way that that was possible unless she had when my sister stood up to the plate and done some of the chores because her mom did write a list and said for her to do some things, and she didn't do it. And her mom said, "Why didn't you do what's on the list?" She said, "Well, I told Darlene to do it." So because she didn't get in trouble, so I got in trouble because I did not do her chores as well. Get my chores done and her chores, so I was responsible for the whole entire house. That's what I mean by being responsible for the whole house. Because she refused to do her chores when she was at home. It caused me to get a beating every day, you know. Okay, in some cases, these less apparent facets of emotional abuse may arise out of the childhood or lived experience of parents, caregivers, teachers, and others, but nonetheless still cause unintended harm to the child. Emotional neglect, defined usually as a failure to attend to the child's emotional needs, never showing emotion while interacting with the child, can also be difficult to spot and quantify, as many parents or caregivers find it hard to provide a safe and loving environment for their children. When facing relationship difficulties, mental health problems, or addiction issues. In some settings, emotional abuse neglect may also echo culturally accepted practices. For example, the girl child neglect phenomenon seen in certain Asian communities, whereby girls receive less care and fewer resources than boys in the same family. Elimination of childhood maltreatment, if all possible, is going to require efforts from many sections of society, including the government. Until these efforts completely succeed, psychiatry, psychology, and neuroscience disciplines must continue to act to fully understand the psychobiological processes that explain mental health problems emerging in association with emotional abuse and neglect, alone or simultaneously with other kinds of maltreatment, and to develop and treat suitable interventions to correct them. So we're going to get on down. In unpacking mental health consequences, children who suffer maltreatment of any kind are known to experience poorer physical and mental health as adults. Regardless of cultural and geographical variations, many people who suffered emotional abuse as children show feelings of helplessness, poor self esteem, reduced sense of social support, poor satisfaction with life, neurobiological changes in stress response systems, and structural and functional brain deficits. And I thank God for us having the internet like now. We can be supported to one another. Like with Facebook, I've got a lot of friends on there as well that um, are supportive, that's been through similar to, and we can be there for each other. And when we see others that have been through similar situations, we hate the fact that they went through it, but nonetheless, we are encouraged by these other people. They mean the world to me because they understand instead of getting all the negativity that a lot of people do present. They are also at a heightened risk of developing psychiatric disorders. Problems such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, suicidal symptomology, psychosis, personality disorder, and substance misuse often emerge in childhood and last through adulthood to old age. Importantly, a growing body of literature from both high and low income countries indicates that emotional abuse might have the most wide ranging negative mental health impact of all child maltreatment types. Yeah, I was taking a thing for my clinical depression, but that was making me worse. I stopped taking it, and I'm not as depressed. Don't get me wrong, I do have at times I do have the depressed issues, from which everybody goes through that. Um, because sometimes it hits you really hard, when you're trying to get through a new hurdle when you remember a new memory or something like that. But I tell you, these medications that they're giving us today, it's not good. I kept telling them that I was having adverse reactions, so I had to quit them. At present, there are few data addressing mental health consequences of emotional versus physical neglect. Nonetheless, both emotional abuse and emotional neglect seem to be transdiagnostic risk factors for psychiatric disorders, especially anxiety and depression, perhaps mediated by dysfunctional emotional processing of self and other related information accompanied with altered use or reduced availability of neural resources. Out of curiosity, I want to go back over here to I want to go back to Amazon and I want to say the child. Yeah. Okay. See, here it is. It's like healing the child within. It's a discovery and recovery for adult children of dysfunctional families. Recovery collections editions. So yeah, it is here. Um, that is the recovery edition, and there's a workbook to go also. Healing the Inner Child Within workbook, a step-by-step guide on how to do the work, the art of more. So, gift to myself a personal workbook and guide to healing the child within. Healing the child within. I'm not sure whether I have the. I think I just had the book. I don't think I have the workbook. But anyway, just wanted to bring that to y'all. So, further to simple association studies, there is now a pressing need for further research to fully develop the mental health. But in a way, all we got to do is really stop being so mean to people, stop neglecting, stop abandoning them, stop treating people with such hate, so much perversion. Okay, so this is what I really want to show you here is rejection, parental abandonment, or neglect a trigger for higher perceived shame and guilt in adolescence. So theories of development point out that childhood experiences are relevant across the lifespan and that the parent-child relationship is essential for a child's physical and psychological well-being. Exactly. The aim of this study is to investigate whether parental abandonment influences self-conscious emotions such as guilt and shame. The experiment included 230 adolescents and teenagers. Okay. And data were collected via a self-reported questionnaire administered online. We used the guilt inventory, the experience of shame scale, the childhood trauma questionnaire, and the parental acceptance rejection questionnaire. Results indicated that the child's environment was significantly associated with feelings of shame. Abuse is associated with both guilt and shame, while parental rejection is associated with guilt. The environment in which children and teenagers develop is associated with how they perceive themselves in relation to others. This study underlines the importance of considering child development conditions and the paramount importance of social work assistance for abandoned children and teenagers. The abandonment of children is a heartbreaking reality that affects countless lives. It is a problem that requires a multifaceted approach, involving not only government agencies but also community organizations and individuals. As a society, we have a moral, ethical, political, and legal obligation to protect our children and provide resources and support to the families in need so that they can provide a stable and loving home for children. Adverse children experiences feeling shames and guilt, and the inability to achieve goals can significantly impact an individual's trajectory and relationships with others in adulthood. These factors can have a profound and lasting effect on a person's overall well being and success. Scientific literature provides little information on the association between child abandonment and self conscious emotions, usually referred to the relationship. One thing that's helped me out more was the Bible. God. That's what helped me out more than anything. Child abandonment concept and its consequences. Child abandonment is often related in scientific literature with child neglect, child abuse, or parental rejection. An abandoned child is a child whose biological parents no longer fulfilled their responsibility to care for and to provide, thereby ignoring their basic developmental needs. Child abandonment represents the worst form of neglect. Wow. The American Psychological Association associates child neglect with the denial of attention, the care of affection considered essential for the normal development of a child's physical, emotional, and intellectual qualities, usually due to indifference from disregard by or impairment in the child's caregivers. In literature, child neglect is associated more with the experience of shame, guilt. Neglect represents the risk factors for children's physical and psychological well being. Child abuse can be defined as a deliberate use of force, physically or psychologically, to carry out acts that have the possibility of causing developmental disruption as well as injury to the mental and physical state of a child. Children as victims of abuse and neglect show high levels of shame. Abandonment refers to a situation where a child is intentionally left behind, openly or secretly, by a parent who has no intention of returning. This abandonment is a voluntary relinquishment of parental responsibility, and no other family member are willing or able to take on the role of the caregiver. Well, there was some other family members who stepped up to the plate, like my aunt went and got us from the store when mom abandoned us, and my aunt grew tired of it. The last time my mom showed up with a knife, I guess she was pointing it at my aunt, but my aunt had a better whip and she had a gun, and she told her to go and never come back. So then after that, mom and dad divorced among various forms of abuse. But he was in with the abandonment too, because he was bad on alcohol at the time. Among the various forms of abuse, the loss of one or both parents leads to what literature calls the abandoned child syndrome, a behavioral or psychological condition. Abandonment may be physical, parental absence, or emotional refusal of the parents to provide affection, care, or stimulation. So that kind of abandonment where it's emotional. The parents are there, but they're not wanting to spend time with the kid. They're not wanting to nurture the kid, hold the kid. They might be even fussing at the kid to shut up. Abandonment means breaking any bonds, especially emotional ones, with a parent or primary caregiver. They say kids are really resilient, but y'all, I am so tired of hearing all these babies getting killed because you're shaking your babies. You do not shake your children. Their brains, their heads are so tiny. You do not shake them. According to the findings of another study, institutionalizing children can expose them to a high risk of experiencing trauma or living with the trauma. This means that placing children in institutions may not be the best solution for addressing their needs, or can have negative effects on the children's mental health and overall well being. Marshall and Keeney in 2009 had showed that those children who grew up in an institutional environment are at a risk of developing physical, emotional, cognitive, behavioral, or social problems. Factors that cause these problems may include negative childhood experiences, age of admission to the institution, the length of time spent there, lack of interaction between children and caregivers, and lack of the presence of a constant caregiver. Alexandrescu in 2021 writes about the suffering of abandoned children resulting from abuse and neglect that can be physical, sexual, and emotional, noting that the main lesson the system teaches them is that they are to blame for their institutionalization. But, that's what we even feel about when we're not institutionalized and doing, when we're at home and having to endure that. We feel that we are to blame. But it's really the sick parent who does these horrible things to the child. Placing a child with a history of institutionalization in a family environment that responds to his or her needs is linked to developmental improvements at all levels. The mother caregiver's inability to show affection to the child has the strongest negative impact on the child's development, making children feel rejected and unaccepted. Like I do have it in my book, and my friend had wrote about it um, when my mother had died and everything. I was beside myself and falling down and everything because I didn't like the fact that even though I no longer talked to her, she was still my mother. Even though she was a horrific monster of a parent, I still cared about her and loved her, regardless to what she had done to me, right? But the last time I talked to her was like about 2000, 2001, and I was giving her another chance, and I said, basically, I was forgiving her. But I didn't even say anything about forgiving her because I was just trying to be a mother daughter. I wanted a relationship, right? I said, I can let bygones be bygones, is what I was thinking. But the first thing, right when I said, hi, mom, she goes, hey, are you selling your naked body to men or or selling your body, prostituting yourself out? I said, here I was 39 years old. I said, no, mom, I'm an adult. I have a choice. I refuse to do that. She said, well, I taught you how to do that since you were born. You were taught to be a prostitute. You were taught to show your body to men. And that impacted me recently because I was thinking the 2-year-old thing. And now when I remember her saying that, I'm like, since birth? You have been grooming me since birth to do these sexual things? That's disgusting, okay? So that's the realization I had recently, like talking about from birth, she actually had me groomed. And I didn't ever think of that full extent of that. But what went on is her saying, I said, no, mom, I'm an adult now. I've got a choice, and I refuse to do that. The next word out of her is the reason why I never talked to her ever again. She said, I wish I would have killed you when you were a baby like I wanted to. And I went click. I hung up on her. Click. All because I refuse to sell myself or show men my naked body. So she wished she had killed me when I was a baby. The lack of maternal responsiveness, a high risk factor for a child's well-being, is characterized by difficulties in identifying, responding to a child's emotional needs, or disruptions in supporting the child's autonomy. This leads to a higher level of child vulnerability, and negative consequences regarding child's externalization. Now, according to a brother, I needed to forgive her by saying, "Okay, your life was worse than mine, Mom. I love you. I want to still be in your life." Or did he said I should have never done any of that? That I should have just kept having her in my life. But I'm like, brother, she had a choice. She had a choice in what she had done. She didn't respect my wishes on me not doing that behavior, on me and being proud of who I am, about me trying to live a Christian life. Um, no, she had a choice, so I'm not going to say, okay, look at her life and um, then say that's okay. I'm not going to say that her life, that she's a role model like he wanted me to do. Anybody that sells their kids, anybody that abuses or abandons their kids, anybody that shames their kids, anybody that just violates their kids, that's not a parent. So the association of shame or guilt with parental abandonment. The literature on shame and guilt refers to those self-conscious emotions. Okay, like one form of abandonment, even though she was standing right there, okay? Even though she was standing right there when she put my body on the table, right? When I was 2. Even though she told me to lay still to take what that guy was going to do to me, okay? She emotionally abandoned me right there to take that abuse, right? That's another form of abandonment. She right there, shut out, let it happen. I was on my own. That's abandoning me, right? In another way. And neglecting, allowing child trafficking. Well, she watched. The experience of shame is directly about the self, which is the focus of evaluation. And guilt, the self is not the central object of negative evaluation, but rather the thing done or undone is the focus. In guilt, the self is negatively evaluated in connection with something, but it is not itself the focus on the experience. Shame, recognized as a negative emotion, involves as inferiority complex, powerlessness, self-consciousness, and a desire to hide flaws. Oh boy, oh man, that was me in a nutshell. Shame, inferiority, powerlessness, self-consciousness, and to hide my flaws. Shame is often seen as a decreased need for affection from parents, as a tendency to be more egocentric or social avoidance. Parental rejection was positively related to self-conscious emotions. Abandonment involves rejection, and the loss of the other's love is a self-shaming experience. Being raised in an institutionalized environment is associated with being stigmatized, which can lead to feelings of shame. Another study notes that shame is often associated with fear of being rejected and abandoned, with behaviors of isolation and submission. All these reinforce the children's ideas that they are despised. Exactly. I kept wondering, what did I do to get this much hate, right? Yes, I am too. I'm so glad, oh lady, oh, that Jesus came into my life. Yeah, several different times. I can't even remember seeing, like when I was being beaten in the head and stuff like that, when I was 10 or 11 years old, when my daddy kept hitting me, that I actually saw angel wings surround me. I woke up in a bed with an ant sponging me off, and evidently God gave her the message that I was in dire trouble because she ran all the way to my house, and she lived about, I guess, which would have took about a 15-minute walk. She got there within 5 minutes, supposedly, of when she got a sense. She said she run all the way. So when y'all read my book, when y'all see like the Ant Roadrunner, that's why I call him her Ant Roadrunner. because she ran all the way to get to me for safety. It's almost like God gave her the message, right? So when I woke up out of whatever type of coma type of stuff, because I was knocked unconscious, I didn't get no medical attention or nothing. But thank God I still survived, right? Yeah. We go, me, me. The literature documents the idea that parental rejection is associated directly with shame in children. It is evident that children who do not receive affection and love from their parents may develop a belief that they are undeserving of such emotions. This can lead to a sense of inadequacy and a feeling of being defective. Ultimately, these negative emotions can manifest as feelings of shame. Guilt is best felt less intensely than shame. Guilt lasts a shorter time and is less debilitating than shame. However, this does not exempt the detrimental impact of guilt on children who have been abandoned. What is more, adolescents rejected by parents are more likely to experience guilt and are more vulnerable to shame than other children. You know what's even sicker than that? Even we went and spent time with my mom when I was 11, and she had a court battle and stuff, and she ended up winning custody of five of us. Um, and I did not want to go. I did not know why I didn't like her so. It didn't take me long to realize that the reason why, because she told me that if I wanted food to eat, I was going to have to go prostitute myself out, right? And so I would just walk um, most of the day, wander around when they were home. I knew not to ask for food or whatever when they were home. Like I said, I walked around when they were not home. I snuck in the house and got me either peanut butter and jelly. What's it? Peanut butter and jelly makes the. I can't remember that name of it. But it stinks like dog food. And then, but mostly I had mayonnaise, ketchup, salt, and pepper sandwiches. That's what I ate mostly. But it helped me survive. I went into the lunchroom at times. I tried at school, and the smell of food made me sick. Okay. So I could not even eat lunch at schools because I was not used to food at home. But there was no way I was going to sell my body. I was Christian. I didn't believe that that was right. So I just walked all over town and walked down the railroad tracks, stayed far, um, went back home when it was about time to go to bed, waited but I was still outside. When I seen the lights go off in the house, that's when I got in the back seat of the car and I slept in the car. I don't know where my siblings slept, but they slept at other people's homes. But my parents didn't even care about them being gone. They could have been kidnapped or something like that, and nobody would have known, right? They didn't care. Different forms of abuse and neglect might be intertwined with shame and guilt, suggesting that they occur because of parental abuse, neglect, or rejection. Children who experience shame resulting from abuse, physical or sexual, perceive themselves as bad in terms of their personal value. Emotional neglect and abuse seem to be positively associated with shame and less so with feelings of guilt. The findings are inconclusive about the correlation between shame, guilt, and physical neglect. Moreover, the number of studies conducted on this topic is limited. In contrast, the results of another study showed that all types of severe violence, childhood sexual abuse, exposure to violence, and physical abuse are positively associated with feelings of shame and guilt, while noting that the greater the number of negative experiences, the more intensely these emotions are felt. The child who experiences abandonment feels unwanted, rejected by his or her parents, and deals with feelings of worthlessness that cause shame. Unpleasant experiences can significantly alter children's perception of their relationships with others. leading to a loss of trust in people. This can have a profound impact on their emotional and social development, potentially hindering their inability to form healthy connections with others in the future. That's why I feel so sorry for a lot of these kids that if the only thing that's accepted in their environments is being sexually abused. So some of them are actually going to go out and think that, they want to be accepted. So they go out and act that type of way, which is sad. It's sad to think that, you know, and then I hope that the adult will be grown up enough to say, no, 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 don't do that. You're a kid. Please just, no, 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 don't do that. No, that's not right. Right. And hope this, person would, try to get help for this individual, this child. The relationship between a caregiver and a child can significantly impact the child's self perception and ability to handle stressors of life. According to the attachment theory, the emotional bond between the mother or the primary caregiver and the child lays the foundation for future relationships in adulthood. Like at first, my evil stepmom, me and her bonded really well. I really thought that, she was a good person. Later on, I didn't know she was going to be the type that start dipping on my nose in cow manure, start beating me around, holding my head down in a sink full of water, which she told me when I was 15. She said, I stopped your temper tantrums when you were 4 by holding your head down in a sink full of water till you lost consciousness. How did I not drown, y'all? How did I not drown? It had to be because of God, you know? A child with insecure attachment exhibits feelings of non acceptance and experiences difficulties in establishing interpersonal relationships. Thus, all these factors increase the likelihood of developing more intense self conscious emotions. One of the most profound effects of growing up in an institutional environment is attachment disorders due to frequent shifts, many caregivers, and the limited availability of caregivers for emotional sharing. Shame and guilt in adolescence. It said adolescence is a stage where major biological, social, and cognitive changes occur, a stage prone to vulnerability. Neuropsychological studies have shown that this age is a critical period for processing social cultural information. It's a time of exploration of abandoned childhood status and beginning adult life. I had to abandon the childhood status a long time when I was in my childhood, like age. I don't even know. Was I ever really able to act like a kid? I don't know, right? Adolescence is a crucial developmental stage for adults, regardless of their risk status. This transitional phase can potentially lead to perilous circumstances, resulting in self estrangement. However, it can present a favorable opportunity for individuals to comprehend their past traumas and attribute no novel significance to them, thereby promoting emotional healing and resilience. Okay, so we're going to go further down. Where in scientific literature, research on shame and guilt frequently focuses on childhood experiences with comparatively less attention paid to adolescence. Um, Shame and guilt. Well, I beg to differ with some of that because it's also about the type of attention that you paid in adolescence. If they're going to pay this sexual type of deviant behavior, the pedophilia, the pornography, like was done with me, right? If they're going to do that kind of stuff, you know, the less, oh man, I would rather them pay me no attention, back and me be in my room and not, not abuse me, give me the stuff necessary for, like the food and shelter and the water, than I would be for them to do this child pornography, child prostitution. Because as a teenager, I stayed back in the bedroom. I played music and tried to stay away from being around them. take walks in the woods, and we had 17 plus acres. That helped clear my head a lot of times because I felt like I was walking with God when I was walking out there in nature. During adolescence, sensitivity, self conscious, emotional stimuli is greater than among children and adults. Shame and guilt, manifested as humiliation and worthlessness, can trigger feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, thus leading to an increased risk of suicide, especially during adolescence. Feelings of guilt in adolescence may take adaptive or maladaptive forms. Predispositions to guilt might increase if there is a history of trauma. Guilt is often associated with negative internal and interpersonal consequences. Feelings of shame can be associated with PTSD, which they're saying there's also CPTSD, which is, I think it's, I can't think of what that C word is. Can anybody remember what that is? And it's CPTSD. I'm going to look that up right quick. Oh, it's chronic complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mental health condition that can develop after prolonged or repeated trauma. Symptoms include difficulty controlling emotions, self-harm, and physical symptoms like chronic pain. Well, there's I don't believe in that. That one's the AI version, okay? The CPTSD or CPTSD or it's a mental health condition that can develop and experience chronic long-term trauma. It involves stress responses such as anxiety, having flashbacks or nightmares, avoiding situations, places, and other things related to the traumatic events. So sometimes if I want to come off the interstate and I want to go through, I take Athens, Alabama exit and I want to go to Huntsville, that is devastating to me because that's the trek I did a lot of my life, when I was married. And it really, when I get into a certain area closer to where I always had to drive, you talk about feeling sick as a dog. I feel like I'm going to be sick everywhere. I mean, it still bothers me today. The stress and the trauma that it's not good. Okay, so and here's also we'll go to this abandonment trauma right here. Trauma is an emotional and psychological response to a negative event that's distressing, disturbing, or painful, says Luis Ramirez, the second marriage and family therapist and clinical director of the Children's Center of Antelope Valley in Lancaster, California. Abandonment trauma results from experiencing or perceiving any type of abandonment that may have been extremely painful for you. It may be related to instances when you felt neglected, threatened, or left behind. Yeah, like I said, that abandonment type of thing when she was standing right there. Yeah, she was standing right there, but she was leaving me to be on my own device, to be abused and stuff like that. She abandoned any of the feelings towards me, as a parent should, had different kind of feelings that should have been to respect the child and treat the child in a loving way. Experiences that can lead to abandonment trauma include physical absence and not feeling physically nurtured or safe. For example, being left in a physically dangerous position by a friend or caretaker. Yeah, that was very dangerous when a man uses a beer bottle on a little girl. Having your physical needs for food and water unmet. Processing the death of a loved one as abandonment. Particularly during childhood, these abandonment events may not have been intentional. However, given their limited emotional and cognitive resources, a baby or child may interpret some situations as being abandoned and experience them as traumatic events. If unaddressed, these abandonment experiences can lead to trauma. Physical abandonment isn't the only event that may be traumatic. Emotional abandonment, that's what I'm talking about. Emotional. When she left me like that, that was emotional abandonment. They also have a great impact on both children and adults. This can include growing up with an emotionally detached or dismissive parent, ghosting from family members, romantic partners, or loved ones in general, experiencing emotional abuse at any age. Not every instance of abandonment will lead you to experience traumatic stress. The long-term effects of abandonment on your mental health may depend, in part on your success to a support network and your internal coping mechanisms. How abandonment impacts your mental health. Trauma can impact the way your brain sorts things out and makes decisions. If you experience a traumatic event during childhood, it can affect the biology of your developing brain. A 2021 systematic review found that there's a link between insecure attachment in early childhood and developing attention deficit hyperactivity disorder later in life. The nature of this link isn't yet understood, though. Another, and that don't mean everybody that's got ADHD has been, or attention deficit, it does not mean that everybody has been abused in that way, okay? Another 2021 systematic review found that children and adolescents who face early life adversity, including deprivation or threatening situation, have reduced executive functioning. Executive functioning refers to your working memory and the ability to control impulses. The bond between you and the primary caregivers partially informs how you learn to relate to others in adulthood, according to a psychological model called attachment theory. Research that supports the theory shows that children who can't rely on caregivers to meet their emotional and physical needs early in life can develop certain mental health conditions, such as reactive attachment disorder. In fact, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, text revision, DSM 5TR, establishes maltreatment and neglect during the early years as the cause of reactive attachment disorder. Abandonment trauma in adults. Fears of being abandoned is one of the potential long-term effects of abandonment trauma. Like when my boyfriend don't call me for, um, he hadn't spoke to me on the phone since, let's see, since the 13th, and now it's the 21st. I kind of feel abandonment. Okay, I had that issue there, and I hate texts, but he does text me, but I hate that. If I'm important enough, please reach out to me. Show me that I'm important enough in a relationship, right? If untreated, the effects of abandonment trauma will continually resurface, explains Ramirez. It will come out like sweat out of our pores, and subconscious responses manifest through negative behaviors, depression, sadness, anger, anxiety, or paranoia. Based on his experience as a therapist, Ramirez also says that people with abandonment trauma are more likely to engage in self-sabotaging behavior. Which at times I did do self-sabotage, self-inflicted pain on myself, self-harm, which I don't do that no more, thank God. I don't. In the case of childhood trauma, it can also impact adult relationships from intimate partners to family ties because they may have a hard time being vulnerable, accepting love, and trusting people. An adult who experienced abandonment as a child may also be more likely to develop symptoms of other mental health conditions. Although research on abandonment trauma is limited, research on trauma effects in general can indicate potential mental health effects of being or feeling abandoned. A 2015 study of 349 people with chronic depression showed that 75.6% of participants reported a history of childhood trauma. Multiple traumatic experiences were linked to more severe depression symptoms. That's when y'all know I had multiple traumatic experiences. So they said I had clinical depression is what they called it as mine. Okay, a 2019 study of 187 participants explored the established link between trauma and psychosis. In this case, researchers worked with people who had their first episode of psychosis. They found those who experienced trauma had a higher chance of displaying severe aggressive behaviors, particularly toward other people. I'm non aggressive, okay? I don't like to hurt anyone. I don't like to see anyone hurt. Findings also indicated that trauma was correlated to depression severity, thoughts of suicide, and non suicidal self injury behavior. Now, if you try to harm one of my kids or one of my grandkids, you're going to see me being aggressive, okay? If I'm right there and I see y'all hurting another adult or a child or y'all abusing somebody right there in front of me, yeah, I'm going to come aggressive. I'm going to step up and say, leave that person alone, and be assertive. Stop doing that to the person. The signs of abandonment trauma are similar to the general signs of other types of trauma. These symptoms may differ according to what stage of development the person is going through when exposed to the dramatic incident. In this case, the abandonment, if you experience prolonged traumatic stress, your symptoms may increase in intensity. The effects and symptoms of trauma in elementary age or younger children may include nightmares or difficulty sleeping, crying or screaming for no apparent reason, separation anxiety, performance difficulty in academic settings, changes in appetite or relationship with food. If untreated, that means like if you want to stop eating or not or to eat. At first, when I had agoraphobia, for a little while, I did have what's that called when you make yourself vomit because you think you're fat. I did have that problem. If untreated, childhood trauma may affect adulthood. Among others, some possible signs and symptoms include substance use disorder, eating disorder, self-harming behaviors and thoughts of suicide, difficulty forming and maintaining stable relationships, self-sabotage, codependency, fear of intimacy, behaviors that may be interpreted as needy, and trauma denial. Yeah, I did have codependency for a little while because, and like the church I went to, they was always saying, the man's higher up, you do what the man says, and all this other kind of stuff. So I was dependent on him, but as for really how a spouse supposed to be, that's the way it should be. But you go and you have discussions in a marriage. You go out and work it out, see how much is on the budget to spend, talk about it. But he wouldn't talk about it, so it led to a lot of problems. How to cope with abandonment trauma. Healing from trauma is possible. Regardless of the traumatic incident you experienced, and even if you were exposed to prolonged traumatic stress, but recovering from trauma is a complex process, and it's highly advisable that you seek the support of a mental health professional. Individuals who seek help with their abandonment trauma impairs their ability to manage functions of daily living like working, going to school, caring for themselves, and maintaining healthy relationships. Additionally, consider these tips to take care of yourself. Try to save time for some joy. Do things that bring you joy. Hobbies, journaling, writing, creating art, playing music, even if it's like playing a record player, practicing gratitude, getting out self every day, go for walks, that kind of thing. Consider mindfulness and meditation. Ramírez also cites meditation as possible outlet for staying grounded and processing trauma. Meditation aims to focus your mind on a thought, idea, or nothing at all to ground your body and promote calm. That's what I go and to myself sometimes. Sometimes I would just sit there, right? And I just be quiet for a minute and I clear my mind of everything and everything. And people would come up to me and say, "What are you thinking about?" And I said, "Nothing." They said, "You got to be thinking of something." Well, they don't realize that I was meditating. I was not thinking on anything. It just felt so calming. to put your mind right there in a standstill. Mindfulness has also been established as an effective coping mechanism for children who have experienced adverse life experiences. Try to reach out. And we got a lot of support group systems and a lot of friends at Facebook and here at YouTube who actually care about others, right? Let's recap. Physical and emotional abandonment can lead to trauma. If a traumatic, well, I'm not going to say it can lead to trauma, it is trauma. When you're physically and emotionally abandoned, it is trauma. If a traumatic incident happened during childhood, it may impact your development and the way your brain is wired. It may also affect the way you see yourself and your adult relationships. Recovering from any type of trauma, including abandonment, is possible. Reaching out to a mental health professional is advisable, and building a support network can help too. Well, sometimes some mental health professionals can help, but there's been some that have negatively impacted me. Like there was after I moved from a place in Alabama after I divorced. Um, I had to go. I went to another city, and the therapist there said, "Well, your daddy never sexually abused you. You wanted him to, though." And I'm like, "Do what?" It took me a while to uncover that secret of being sexually abused, and you want to tell me and blame me and say I wasn't done that way? Well, excuse me, right? Let's go over here saying these present research is a quasi experiment based on self reported online questionnaire. Informed consent was obtained. Okay, let's read this hypothesis of the story, okay? H1. Children and teenagers with higher levels of parental rejection will report stronger feelings of guilt than those with lower levels of rejection. When we go through that a lot of times, we're often going up to people, I'm sorry, somebody doing something, and you naturally just blame yourself. Oh, they looked at me, so it's my fault. I put them. I mean, it goes really weird, on some of the aspects. Just from them seeing me, it made their day worse. That's how our own self esteem is degraded really bad. Uh, back back in those times. So we really got to pull ourselves out. That's when I was seeing through the dark shades. I was not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I was taking all the blame for everything. Man, what a burden! I was taking everybody's guilt when somebody just having a bad day, somebody tripping over a stone. That's how bad it was. That's pretty bad. H2, children and teenagers with higher levels of parental rejection will report stronger feelings of shame than those with lower levels of rejection. H3, children and teenagers with higher levels of abuse will report more guilt than those with lower levels of abuse. H4, children and teenagers with higher levels of abuse will report more shame than those with lower levels of abuse. H5, children and teenagers raised in institutional care will report higher levels of guilt than children raised in a family environment. I don't know about that. I already had a really high, extensive level of guilt. Children and teenagers raised in institutional care report higher levels of shame than children raised in a family environment. But then again, I didn't have a family environment type of thing, really, because it was not like a family. The questionnaire was, I don't have to read all this right here. Okay. One difficulty of study was applying the questionnaire to the group of participants in institution care. It is necessary to adapt the questionnaire for the categories of participants living in a home environment and those in institutional settings. The adaptation referred to lexical modifications such as parents versus caregivers, family home, or institutional care. And a lot of times when you think that you're not really having a lot of guilt or whatever, you think that when people are asking you these questions, you don't want the people even in the psychiatry field or psychology field, to know how bad you're really feeling. So a lot of times you do not tell them the brunt of all that because you don't 100% trust who you're talking to, okay? So a lot of times that makes it even more difficult. Respondents answered on a 5-step Likert scale ranging from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Items were coded into that higher numbers reflected greater guilt. That is, that's the guilt one. The shame one, and you felt ashamed of your personal habits. Each item is rated a 4-point scale for not at all, very much, given total scores in a range 25 100. Y'all would believe how many times I have answered that and not really, when I done a questionnaire, I did not answer um, truthfully when I done those because I didn't want to be looked at as bad because I knew they knew that I was the one taking the test. And so it wasn't like you're in a whole group of people taking a quiz and doing that, deciphering from, one or two. So I was so afraid of them really knowing some deep, dark secrets that I have. I was too afraid to let them know um, how I really was doing. So then there was abandonment. We used a childhood trauma questionnaire, a questionnaire containing 28 items with responses on a Likert scale from never true to very often true. My family members call me stupid, lazy, or ugly with 5 clinical scales: emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, and physical neglect. The 5 corresponding item scores are summed to attain total scales. And see, some of the times, whenever I answered some of the quiz too, like I did not uncover some of the sexual abuse until a lot longer, a lot later. So some of my stuff would not been adequate or appropriate at the moment too, right? It took me, like I said, going to the Huntsville Library, talking to, doing genealogy whenever I met up with the state trooper, and him said he remembered me from all the sex abuse from the child pornography. Had he not said that, I don't know if I would have ever remembered that about the child pornography. Seriously, I don't. Him telling me that knocked me off my feet and I fell backwards. So I was seeing dark figures. I was having nightmares, seeing them come at me and everything, but that was the extent. But no, I didn't remember the other stuff. And then I started remembering, I was seeing me being in at the auction place in one of the rooms standing dressed up. And then I blacked out. Okay. I guess it was so traumatic that I blacked it out. Um, but I just seen little instances like that. But I thank him for stepping up. Like, I remember you from the child pornos that he had over 300 to 400 of them or something. And I was in the majority of them. And he still enjoyed doing me, but he's deceased now. And I recently met up with 2 people that were actually kin to him, and they validated that family, that they did this. They validated it, y'all. And this was recent. It was right before Christmas. The present research aimed at investigating whether abandonment influences adolescents' feelings of shame and guilt. Abandonment is viewed in this paper through the lens of parental abuse, neglect, and rejection. The results show: number one, children and teenagers growing up in an institution can report higher levels of shame than children and teenagers growing up in a family setting. But there are no differences in guilt. That's right. The higher the level of abuse, the more intense the feelings of shame and guilt. Yep. Feelings of guilt, but not shame, are influenced by parental rejection. The stage of adolescence is not a factor in increasing feelings of shame and guilt. As I said before, I had a lot of shame and guilt. But when I started putting the blame in the proper perspective, putting it on the perpetrators instead of accepting all that blame for myself. That's what helped a lot more. I guess we'll just go ahead. Okay, like it says right here, that adolescents from abusive or broken homes may in some cases resort to self-medicate behaviors such as alcohol or drug abuse, engaging in sexual activities with siblings who cannot give true consent, or threatening and harming siblings, parents, or even law enforcement officials with knives or other weapons. These actions can lead to feelings of guilt and shame, compounding the already challenging circumstances these young individuals face. It's crucial for future research to consider these variables when examining the effects of abuse in broken homes on adolescent behavior. By doing so, we can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the complex and often devastating consequences of these experiences. Go further down. Okay. But it does say the study was conducted in accordance with the Declaration of Helsinki and ethically approved by the RL Valachuu, I don't know how to pronounce it, University of Arad, Faculty of Educational Sciences, Psychology, and Social Work, Center of Research, Development, and Innovation of Psychology. I hope I helped shed some light on some of this stuff. I'd say thank you everyone for coming. If y'all want to touch base with me, y'all know my Facebook, um, or y'all can write me at my email, but that's going to be kind of hard. Some of the emails might get lost in space if I don't know you'll be writing me. Um, so I want to say God bless each and every one of y'all. But it's important to know that neglect and abandonment does have severe repercussions, even if they do say, "Oh, that I wasn't hit" or something like that. So some of the people that ain't been hit, there's different ways. The neglect can harm. A lot of that does cause a lot of other physical problems, not just the psychological. Thanks, everybody, and God bless you.